You got to hand it to them. Sometimes the Americans, they just make better sci-fi. When Worlds Collide is the 1951 classic science fiction film directed by Rudolph Maté and produced by the legendary George Pal. That George Pal, the one that gave us The War of the Worlds, Destination Moon, The Conquest of Space and The Time Machine, amongst other stone cold sci-fi classics. And it's based on the 1933 novel of the same name. The film is about a rogue star called Bellus and its companion planet Zyra that's on a collision course for Earth, and it chiefly follows a group of scientists whose main aim is to build a rocket ship to evacuate 40 survivors in the vague hope of saving just a small piece of humanity. The film starts off with pilot Dave Randall, and he's in South Africa and he's been told he's got to take these top secret documents from this observatory in South Africa to a scientist in New York. On the way, he's hounded by journalists offering him just untold riches in order to give up the secret documents, and being a man of integrity, he refuses to do so. Before he started his journey in South Africa, he was told in no uncertain terms, do not hand these documents over to anybody apart from the recipient, and that recipient is Dr. Cole Hendron. So when he eventually arrives in New York, he's again hounded by a member of the press offering him $70,000, which is in 2024 money, probably the equivalent of about £500 million or something silly, but he is greeted by Joyce Hendron, Dr. Cole Hendron's daughter. Now, owing to a little bit of confusion, they assume that he's already been brought in on the secret, so he's welcomed into their confidences. He hands the information to Dr. Hendron and they start running it through a very early rudimentary mechanical computer. I actually think that footage of that mechanical computer is actually used in Destination Moon and War of the Worlds as well. Anyway, back to the story. When the computer spits out the info, it's bad news. The planet Zyra is going to pass so close to Earth, it's going to cause just catastrophic destruction. Worse still, Bellus, the rogue star, is also going to go crashing into planet Earth, wiping out everything. It's going to destroy the entire planet. Armed with this information, they take it to the UN, the United Nations Security Council. The information is debated, but ultimately dismissed out of hand. He gets laughed out of the UN basically, which is really bad news actually, because they've only got 8 months left to save humanity. During his presentation to the United Nations, Dr. Hendron proposes that they build a series of space arcs that will take a small portion of humanity off of planet Earth and hopefully settle on the planet Zyra, because it's looking like this planet can sustain life. As Dr. Hendron leaves the UN in New York with a very big flea in his ear by the looks of it, 2 wealthy industrialists approach him and they're like, hey, we believe ya, we're old and we're wealthy, let's do this, let's build a space ark and save a little bit of humanity. They give him enough capital and enough resources to start construction, but he's still a long way short. Several scientists, along with Dr. Hendron, begin work at a former US Army proving ground. And during this period, Dr. Hendron sort of twigs it. He sort of realises that his daughter Joyce, she's got feels for the pilot, Dave Randall, the pilot that brought the information at the beginning of the film, which is a little bit complicated because she's sort of in a relationship with somebody else, one of the other scientists that are part of this team. Dr. Tony Drake, he's the biologist, he's the chief medical officer of what they've got going on. And I've heard a lot of people say that this subplot is a little bit distracting. It sort of detracts from the whole science fiction element we've got going on here. But I disagree. I think this provides a lot of humanity to the story. And if you've got a story about saving humanity, then it's kind of wise to show a bit of humanity in the story, isn't it? They are still short on funds though. They really need to get this rocket built. Fortunately though, for Dr. Hendron, at this point in the story, in walks, or wheels, Mr. Sidney Stratton, the amoral billionaire industrialist, who initially tries to buy the entire project and save his own filthy hide and the filthy hides of 40 other billionaire industrialists. Unfortunately for him though, Dr. Hendron is made out of much sterner stuff than that, and he's having none of it. And he's like, no way, you ain't buying the ticket onto this. You can fund it, yeah, and I'll save you, but you're not having 40 people that don't deserve a place on this. No, we're going to pick at random 40 people out of the hundreds of people that have worked on this project. So for your investment, you're going to get one seat, and it's a deal that Stratton just cannot refuse. After this, work begins apace on the rocket. We get a really, really great montage scene of them loading livestock and building the rocket and microfilming the Bible amongst other really important scientific textbooks. And as Zyra and Bellus get closer and closer and become visible in the night sky, martial law is declared because humanity starts to panic. Those scientists that were initially quite disparaging of it start to come around to Dr. Hendron's way of thinking. They only disagree on his rocket. They think his rocket cannot be built, although it is stated very clearly in dialogue that there are several rockets being built by other nations around the Earth, which opens us up for a sequel, which we didn't get, which I really wish we did, because the sequel to the novel is actually pretty good. So, out of the two rogue bodies that are approaching planet Earth, it's the planet Zyra, which is approaching first, with the star Bellus approaching sometime later. So as Zyra nears, the pace of the film sort of picks up. We get more montages, we get a real sense of urgency happening now within this film. Until it happens. Zyra makes its pass, and it is absolutely devastating. We get to see everything from volcanic eruptions to tsunamis to earthquakes to forest fires. It is all the worst parts of the Bible happening at once. And I really have to say it, for a film that's produced in 1951, the special effects here are absolutely excellent. And it's at this point as well, we get a little bit of more humanity coming into the story. We get to see the rescue operations happening, we get to see people evacuating. You get a really, really great scene between Randall and Drake. Now, Drake knows that Joyce has got feels for Randall. He's seen it, you know, she's been really cold to him. They was on one. Them two were together beforehand, and Randall's come along and he's been flying the ointment and he's basically nicked his girl. Even though it's not official at this point, because Randall is really trying to keep out of it. Because he knows that they're going to blast off to Zyra and he wants to be left on Earth just to let them two get on with it. But the two guys nearly get into a bit of a punch up before they go off to drop some medical supplies off in a helicopter. And it's on their way back from doing this that they spot the wreck of a house in a river and they see a little boy tied to the roof. So they fly down to him and Randall jumps out to rescue the child, and as he places him in the helicopter, he turns around to go and get the boy's bundle of belongings, and Drake flies off, and it's like, oh my god, he's left him there, like. But he doesn't fly off. He circles back, he lands, he collects him, and they have a moment with each other, and it's like, okay, look, all's forgiven, I'll get it, kind of thing. You know, all's fair in love and war. But again, it's the humanity which is so important to this story. And it is laid on thick from here on in. You get this sort of other side plot of this young couple that have found each other during the building work on this rocket. They never knew each other beforehand, but they've fallen deeply in love, and they're hoping to build a better life on the planet Zyra for themselves, gambling that they're going to get seats. And you've got to take one look at this couple. I mean, they are all American prom king and queen from 1950. Like, if there was any more 1950s American young couple, they'd injure bystanders, you know. Again, the pace picks up. You see Stratton saying to Dr. Hendron at some point or another, look, I brought some firearms into this because, you know, humanity is going to fall and ain't a single one of them going to be stopped by that barbed wire fence you got out there. So I bought some shooters and we're going to defend ourselves. We'll need them, trust me. And Dr. Hendron's a little less cynical than that. He believes in humanity. He believes that no one's going to try and nick his spaceship. And Randall, well, as far as he's concerned, again, he wants to stay out of things. He doesn't want to be between Joyce and Drake. He wants them to go off and live their life, even though he's got feels for Joyce. But the launch date is approaching rapidly. They're 11 days out from it. And Dr. Hendron can't hold on much longer. He has to hold a lottery for all the workers that have worked on this rocket. And there's 600 odd people that have been working on it, and there's 40 seats. So 40 lucky numbers. With himself, his daughter, Stratton, the flight crew of the rocket, and much to his chagrin, Randall, there's actually not 40 seats left. Randall is dismayed at this. He didn't realise he had a guaranteed seat. He thought he was going to go in the lottery like the rest of them and take his chances with the rest of humanity. Because at heart, he's actually a good man, and we've seen early on in the film, he's a man of great integrity who can't for the life of him work out what use he would be on the new planet. And Dr. Hendren tells him, he says, look, it's for Joyce. I love my daughter and she loves you, so there's got to be a way of making you come. But he's having none of it. But in the end, it's Dr. Drake. He sees it. He sees how much Joyce loves Randall, and he loves her enough to let her go. So he contrives something. He says, hey, look, the pilot, he's got an heart condition. Could you possibly fly this spaceship? If you can't fly it, no one else can. So you really need to come to really save everyone's lives, but Joyce's life as well. So Randall decides that, yeah, you know what, he's going to make a go of it. He's going to make a new life with Joyce on the planet Zyra. With literally hours to go as well, because Bellus, that's getting really big in the sky. So it's stated a lot throughout the film as well. The reason they're only bringing 40 people is simple, it's maths. It's the amount of fuel the rocket has got on it. They're going to need every pound of fuel they can carry. But at this point, boom is on humanity. Things are starting to break down. The entire camp is in open mutiny, so they better launch that rocket pretty quick. And as the mutineers on the camp are about to reach the rocket, Dr. Hendren is releasing the clamps, and the last man to be onto that rocket is actually, really surprisingly, is Stratton. Now, I'd have thought Stratton would have been on that rocket from the minute, like, you know, that star's getting big in the sky. I thought he'd been living in it as I was building it around him. But no, he's not. He's already gunned down his long-suffering assistant, Ferris, because he weren't going to bring Ferris with him anyway, but so Ferris was like, well, hey, I'll do you in and I'll take your seat. But Stratton and Hendren are the last people that are about to board that rocket. And it's Hendren that holds Stratton back, and he tells him, no, this ain't for you. Zyra is not a world for old men like us. You've lost, old man. You've been a thorn in my side for months over this. And the game's up. The rocket takes off. And it's a perfect flight. They black out halfway through, they wake up, and they glide into a perfect landing on a mountainside on Zyra. They open up the airlock and all is well. It is a breathable atmosphere on an idyllic, virgin world. Or so it seems, because as the camera pans, you see in the distance, beyond this lush forest and open green fields they've got in front of them, is an alien city. And the film ends with the crew of the rocket leaving 2 by 2. So this film had been in production hell from 1934, and originally it was Cecil B. DeMille that wanted to produce and direct this film. The what if possibilities there are just mind-boggling. I'm actually very glad that he didn't do it though, because I think in the 1930s the technology just wasn't there yet. And I think by 1951, the technology was there. It could do the story real justice. And as well as this, I think George Powell was the right man for the job. He just produced Destination Moon, which will get its own video on this channel because it's one of my personal favourites. And yes, this film is just chock full of biblical references, left, right and centre. It even starts with a passage from Genesis. But a lot of American science fiction from that era was full of that sort of thing. Some more subtle than others, yes. I mean, look at The Day the Earth Stood Still. That's very subtle in its biblical allegories, yes. But this film, it's slightly more sledgehammer than that. And if I was a better Catholic, I'd be able to do a lot better job of unpacking these references for you. But I'm not, so here we go. But certainly, there is a lot of Bible stuff in this story. I mean, I mentioned before, they leave the rocket 2 by 2. They go in 2 by 2 as well. And it has to be said as well, for all of the environmental disasters that happen due to this, they seem to dwell on the floods more than anything else. And there is so much going on between Dr. Hendren and Sidney Stratton. So it would be easy to go, oh yeah, well Dr. Hendren is Noah. And yeah, he's very Noah-like in this story. But there's something else happening. it's like, yeah, he's Noah, but he's almost like a Jesus figure as well, but only in his interactions with Stratton. Now, you often see these two having a bit of a ding-dong with each other. They're always bickering and arguing. Stratton wants it his way, Hendren will have it his way. And Stratton represents the worst parts of human nature, the worst parts of humankind, greed, lust, envy, the worst bits of it. And Hendren represents the best. So it will be easy to look at this and go, well, hey, look at the way this scene is framed. You've got Stratton down here low, because he's always sat down because he's in that wheelchair, and Hendren stood up high, preaching down to him. And Stratton is always trying to tempt Hendren. This is almost like the devil trying to tempt Jesus, and then Jesus going, no, I'm not having none of that. And at the very end of it, when them two are having their final showdown in what looks like it could be the flames of hell, look at the colour in here, there's the big red backdrop and everything going on. Stratton is confined to his wheelchair for the entirety of this film. Apart from this moment here where he gets up and he walks. He tries to walk onto this rocket. And who used to get disabled people walking and stuff? Who cured the sick and unblinded the blind and all that sort of biblical stuff? For all its sledgehammer Bible stuff going on here, some of it is really subtle. Now, I think that Richard Durr and Barbara Rush are just absolutely amazing in this film. They are hands down some of the best performances in the entire film. But I've got to be honest with you, it's John Hoyt that steals the show. Now, if you're a viewer of this channel, you'll most likely recognise him as Dr. Boyce from the Star Trek the original series episode The Cage. But I honestly think without this actor in this role, the film just would not be the same. He literally threw the book at this part. He's fantastic. He's easily the most memorable character in the film. He gets this villainous swine Stratton down to a T. But what is it about this film? Why 70 years later are we still talking about it? Why is it still relevant to us now? Well, on a technical level at least, the director really captures this sense of existential dread. There is a very real sense of impending catastrophe here. Because remember, Earth is facing annihilation here. And through some truly stunning visuals and a genuinely haunting soundtrack, you're left with a very vivid picture of a planet teetering on the edge of oblivion. And of course, when you watch it in its context, when you think to yourself, hey, how would the average viewer in 1951 see this? You sort of understand that this film isn't really about a planet about to crash into Earth. It's about Cold War yet again. This is about nuclear annihilation. Because for the first time in humanity's history, as I've said before, we had the ability to completely destroy all life on Earth. And from that, we get the real message of this film. It's a film about human resilience in the face of complete catastrophe. From my perspective in 2024 watching this film, I see kind of like a time capsule of the attitudes of the era. Now remember, in 1951, America was, and still is now, the top dog. It's the #1 nation on Earth. It's the only global hegemon. So naturally, the film is about the American spirit. Specifically, that pioneer spirit. Now, I've met a lot of Americans in my time. They are all types of crazy, they are all types of fun, they are all types of good, all types of bad. But they all have the same thing in common. They all seem to have this kind of swaggering self-confidence. And it comes from being American. It comes from that kind of pioneer, frontier spirit of theirs. It's their foundation myth. It's the Wild West. It's this sense that you can give them a couple of cows and a copy of the Bible and they can do anything. And that's what this film is saying to you. With all of the Bible references chucked in and all the existential horror and the love story, everything chucked into it, when it's boiled down, that's what this film is saying. It's telling the audience that, hey, we may be faced with catastrophe, but we will persevere and we will make our way through it because that is our nature. It is written into our culture. It is why we are the best. It is why we are the greatest. It is why, now currently, we are the global hegemon when all of the other great powers have completely collapsed around us. We have defeated fascism and we will defeat communism. Now in 1951 that message was very pertinent and possibly very uplifting for the audience. But nowadays, is it still relevant? Well, to a certain degree, yes. Nowadays, arguably, mankind has greater capabilities of destroying itself. Nuclear arsenals are much more vast than they was in the 1950s, and we've got the added threat of terrorism, climate change, global conflict to add to that mix. And I think this is why the disaster genre rears its ugly head every 20 years or so, because we wouldn't have had those 1970s disaster films without When Worlds Collide. We certainly wouldn't have had the Poseidon Adventure, Meteor, Earthquake or Towering Inferno, for instance. And again, this is a further reason why this film is so important, it's so influential, because it proved there was an appetite amongst the public for this sort of thing. People really wanted this visual spectacle of flash floods and forest fires and earthquakes and tsunamis and everything. So in summary, it is for all of that. That is why this film is a science fiction great, because it just expertly brought together so many different elements, from fantastic characters and storytelling to truly groundbreaking special effects. And in actual fact, I actually feel the special effects in this film are more ambitious than War of the Worlds, which came out 2 years later. It's got a genuinely haunting musical score as well. It really does help tell the story. All this as well as being like a kind of social time capsule for American culture of the early 50s. Now, this isn't the video I wanted to make this week. I had something else in the pipeline. But on the 31st of March this year, Barbara Rush died. So in honour of her performance as Joyce Endron in this film and countless other performances, I decided to make this video this week. Barbara Rush, I salute you. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments down below because I do love interacting with you guys in the comments section. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe as well because that really helps the channel out. And I genuinely really do enjoy making these videos for you guys.